Pesach, the Jewish festival of freedom. It is an extraordinary testimony to the power of ritual to keep ideals and identity alive across centuries. On this night, we gather to relive the story of our people, to sit together as an extended family and imaginatively return to Egypt on the eve of the liberation, after long exile and harsh enslavement. The night exists not merely to remember history, but to make history present, to experience it anew through ritual and retelling. It is history made in memory through reenactment. We begin this drama by holding up the matzah, the dry, unleavened bread that is one of the key symbols of this festival. And we say, Ha-lachmaniya, this is the bread of affliction our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all those who are hungry come and eat. A child, usually the youngest present, then asks the famous questions. Why is this night different than any other night? The rest of the evening is dedicated to answering them, retelling the story of the Exodus through acts of eating, drinking, the bitter herb of suffering, and the wine of freedom. Yet the evening has hidden depth. The matzah itself presents a profound puzzle, and in fact two puzzles that end up being one. In the opening of the Seder, we hold up the matzah as halachmania, the bread of affliction, the symbol of bondage of what our ancestors endured in Egypt. But later in the Haggadah, when we reach the passage of Rabban Gamliel, matzah zo al shumma, this matzah, why do we eat it? The meaning is reversed entirely. Here matzah represents the bread of freedom. The bread our ancestors ate while they were leaving Egypt in such a haze that they could not stop, could not wait for the dough to rise. The same bread, two opposite meanings. At the beginning of the night, it is the bread of slavery. By the middle of the night, it is the bread of liberation. How can we reconcile this contradiction? The second puzzle is the invitation itself. We open up the Seder by holding up the matzah, the bread of affliction, and calling out, whoever is hungry, come and eat. But one might ask, what kind of hospitality is that? To invite someone to share not abundance, but suffering? Come join me in my affliction. Seems like a strange way to invite a guest in. Remarkably, both questions have the same answer. It emerges from the book of a Holocaust survivor, Primo Levi. He recalls that the worst period of his enslavement was the 10 days that the Germans abandoned the camp. Those who could still walk were taken to the brutal death marches. Those left behind, the sick and the dying, were left with almost no food, no heat, no shelter, in the depth of the Polish winter. Eventually, Levi and two companions managed to light a fire and gather some warmth. And then as the heat began to spread, something shifted. In his own words, he says, Towarowski proposed to the others, each of them offer a slice of bread to us three who had been working. And so it was agreed. Only a day before, Levi tells us this would have been unthinkable. The law of the camp was brutal and absolute. Eat your own bread, and if you can, eat your neighbor's too. Survival left no room for generosity, and yet, here, one man offered his slice of bread to another. Levi understood immediately what that meant. Quote, it was the first human gesture that occurred among us. I believe that that moment can be dated as the beginning of the change, by which we, who had not died slowly, changed from prisoners to human beings again. And this is the answer to both questions. When we share our affliction with others, when we divide that little that we have with a stranger, we transform the bread of affliction into the bread of freedom. The bread of affliction and the bread of liberation are indistinguishable. It isn't the matzah that changes, it is us. Affliction shared is the beginning of redemption. One who fears tomorrow cannot offer their bread to others, but those willing to share the little they have already demonstrated fellowship and faith. And from those two things, hope is born. That is why the Seder opens with an invitation, not to a feast, but to a shared hardship. This is how affliction is turned into freedom. But there's a deeper question still. Why does any of this matter? Why has this night, this story, this ritual endured for more than 3,000 years? The Seder is the oldest surviving ritual in the Western world. It traces 3,300 years to the night when the Israelites ate their last meal in Egypt, preparing for the journey to freedom. And yet, it is more than a ritual. It is an act of remembering, of retelling the story, the Haggadah, and none have sustained more lovingly across time. In the course of a single Seder night, we encounter voices spreading through millennia. He led in the time of the Second Temple, the 2nd century sages gathered as Meblach, medieval poetry, and children's songs from Germany. The Haggadah is not a work of a single author. It is a collective voice of the Jewish people. Across centuries, continents, each generation adding its layer to an unbroken conversation with God and with history. Haggadah means to relate, to tell, to expound, but is closely related to another Hebrew word, meaning to bind, to join, to connect. By reciting the Haggadah, Jews give their children a sense of connectiveness to Jews throughout the world and to the Jewish people throughout time. It connects each Jew, wherever they live, whatever language they speak, to a shared past and a shared destiny. Every other people have been united geographically, through language or culture. Jews alone, dispersed across continents for millennia, have been held together through a story, the Pesach narrative, told in the same way on the same night across the entire world. More than the Haggadah being the story of the people, Jews became the people of the story. There's a fundamental difference between living in the past and living with the past. Judaism is a religion of memory. We remember the Exodus annually, even daily, but we do so for the sake of the future, not of the past. When one takes part in the Seder, telling the story of the book of the Exodus, it's not a culture act like watching TV or reading a book. It is an enactment. On Pesach, the Exodus ceases to be mere history and becomes a memory. Not as something that happened somewhere else to someone else, but something that is happening here, now, to each of us. It defines us as part of a story, linking us to a community of others in different places and different times. It changes us, for we know now what it feels and tastes like to be oppressed, and we can no longer walk by when people are oppressed. People who have truly lived through the Seder are different for have done so, and the world is different because of them. It is why so many Jews were found in the fight against apartheid, why rabbis marched with Martin Luther King. Pesach is a festival of Jewish identity. It is the night in which we tell our children who they are. What we give through that telling is threefold: the gift of identity, the gift of values, and the sense of continuity. They're all part of the story that includes us, as our story includes the one who came before us. It is education as a conversation between generations. And through that conversation, we answer the three fundamental questions every reflective person must ask. Who am I? Why am I here? And how then should I live? The Jewish answers are: I am a member of the people whom God rescued from slavery to freedom. I am here to build a society that honors the freedom of others, not just my own. And I must live in conscious knowledge that freedom is a gift of God, honored by keeping His covenant and law and love. Once a child carries those answers, their identity becomes extraordinary. This is why, as a most intense moment of impending liberation, with freedom days away, Moses did not speak of the land, or the journey, or the wonders they have witnessed. He spoke of education, he spoke of children, and of the duty to tell them the story. 3 times, he returns to the same theme. When the children asks, tell them, make it vivid, make it personal. Say not that God did this for their ancestors, but that God did this for me. Because freedom is the work of a nation. Nations need identity. Identity needs memory, and memory lives in the story we tell. Without that story, something essential is lost. And not only to the Jews, the Exodus narrative has shaped Western civilization itself. Through figures like John Locke and Thomas Jefferson, it gave rise to the vision in which all people are created equally, possessing inalienable dignity. As one historian put it, it is the West's great meta-narrative of liberty, a homecoming more astonishing than any other in history. The people dispersed for 2,000 years have returned as a sovereign nation, speaking the language of the Bible and rebuilding the city of their ancestors. The power of this story has been captured with extraordinary force by David Ben-Gurion. Speaking at the United Nations in 1947, he said, 3,000 years ago, a ship called the Mayflower set sail to the New World, a momentous event in English history. And yet, he asked, does a single Englishman know at what hour it sailed, how many people were aboard, what bread they ate? Yet more than 3,300 years ago, before the Mayflower even set sail, the Jews left Egypt. And every Jew in the world, whether in America or in Soviet Russia, knows the exact date, the 15th of Nisan. Everyone knows what bread they ate. They still eat the same bread on the same night every year. They still retell the stories of the Exodus and all the suffering the Jews have endured since, and they still conclude with the same words. This year slaves, next year free, this year here, next year in Jerusalem, said Ben-Gurion. It is the nature of the Jews. To be a Jew is to join the journey of our people, the story of the long walk across centuries and continents from exile to homecoming. As we sit around the Seder table, rehearsing the journey from the bread of oppression to the wine of freedom, we commit ourselves to a momentous proposition, that history has meaning. We're not condemned to repeat tragedies of the past endlessly. We're heirs to a story that had inspired more than 100 generations and helped shape the moral architecture of the modern world. The greatest gift we can give our children is not wealth or security, but precisely this: a story, a real story, one that connects them to us, to those who came before us, and to the high ideals that have always defined what it means to be a Jew. To know who you are and why you're here is to be able to navigate the wilderness of time with courage and with faith.